Hello everyone, and thank you for coming. It's so nice to see you guys tonight on this very beautiful night that we're having. My name is Robin Munson. I do the adult programming here at the library. I'm going to talk about a few things we have coming up and going on. In case you're interested in, just let me know. So we have Jerry Fit senior fitness classes every Monday and Friday at 1 o'clock p.m. You can sit in a chair. We lift weights. We stretch with a stretch band. We do a whole lot of stuff. Do what you can, you know. We don't try to make you go beyond what your capabilities are. But if you're interested in that, just let me know. That's Jerry Fit every Monday and Fridays at 1 o'clock p.m. So we have summer reading program coming up, and we do this every single year. It's through kindergarten to adults. So you guys are also included if you want to be a part of this. All you have to do is sign up for it. We are having our kickoff party. That's a come and go party on May 28th from 1 to 5 p.m. We can show you how to sign up through a Beanstack app that we have, which is an app that tracks your reading. Or we have it on paper for those of us that do not want more phone and technology stuff in their hands. We do have a paper copy, and all you have to do every hour that you read, just check it off. Every hour you read, you get entered into our final prize drawings. And so the more you read, the more chances you have to win. So if you're interested in that, and you can read whatever you want. We're not telling you what to read. You read what you want. You can listen to whatever you want to on audiobooks. So our book discussion, we have one every month. So in June, our discussion is June 1st at 6 o'clock p.m. We are reading The Wandering Stars by Tommy Orange. So this is a fiction book, and it kind of explores how one traumatic event can cause generational trauma throughout all the generations. So if you're interested in that, June 1st, 6 o'clock p.m., we have books that you can check out, so you don't even have to buy your own book. We have, on June 12th, we have Tim Grover. He's an Iowa author coming here. He wrote the book, Barnstorming Babe, a slugger's bumpy trek across small town America. So if you're interested in that, that's June 12th at 10 o'clock a.m. And what that is he's going to talk about Babe Ruth and how he did little minor league teams at one point in the summer. And he traveled around through the Midwest and played games here. So he's going to have some paraphernalia, or is that right? Memorabilia? That sounds like a okay. No, we're not going to get that exciting at 10 a.m. in the morning. But he will have some memorabilia here, baseball stuff. So you can take a look at some of his old gloves and photos and things like that. Right now, we have another Iowa author here. This is her third memoir. It's Mary McSwain Steele. She is here from Clay County, from Spencer, and she's going to talk about her third memoir, which is very exciting. We're very excited for her. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. With me is my husband, Steve. We've been married 55 years. At the end of this month, we were married right out of kindergarten. Do the math. And he wrote a book with me. In fact, our second book was co-authored by Steve, and he wasn't thrilled about the idea. I said, "Come on, it'll be fun." What was I thinking? But interestingly, he ended up kind of enjoying doing the writing, and especially reminiscing. He's a big reminiscer, so he enjoyed that.
It's easier when you get to make up stuff.
Oh, the truth comes out.
He thinks I should write fiction. I should try my hand at fiction. I said, no, I have a newspaper background. I've just got to take the facts and put them in a logical order. I'm not creative enough. Hi, Joanne. Number one. Late. Hi. Hi. So, think about the times in your life that were life-changing for you. Could be good things, could be bad things. Were they things that you saw coming, or did they surprise you? You don't have to answer that. I think sometimes our most life-changing moments are the ones we never saw coming. And that's certainly true of the 3 books that I've written. All 3 of them have an element of surprise that I wasn't expecting. And we'll be talking about that some. But if there's a thread that ties all 3 books together, it's that life rarely unfolds the way we expect it to. You maybe have a different experience. So a little bit of background before I tell you about Somewhere Out There. After my mother died in 2009, I struggled with grief, which really surprised me because she was almost 85. It was her 3rd bout with cancer. She was healthy and active, but I didn't think I'd struggle with grief as much as I did. And so for therapy, I started writing letters to her, and many letters, most of them or many of them are in the book. And I didn't tell anybody. I thought my kids would think I was going over the edge. And so I didn't tell them about it. But then I started thinking, you know, if I put some family history with this and some stories about my mom when she was young, I maybe have something that I can give to my kids, maybe just run off on a copy machine. When they read it, they encouraged me to make it available to a wider audience. So that's how Betty, a Memoir, was born. That's a book with the little red-haired girls. I know a lot of you have already read it. This is not my mom, by the way. This is the daughter of a friend of my daughter's friend, but we all had red hair. So after I published Betty, a Memoir, in Betty, towards the end, I write about a long-kept secret my mom had told no one about except 2 people. She had gotten pregnant in nurses training, and when she told the father of the baby, she never saw him again, never heard from him again. So the only other person she told was a doctor at Gunderson Clinic in La Crosse, Wisconsin, where she was working. And he arranged for her to go to Kansas City to have the baby. Kansas City was considered the hub, the adoption hub, because the trains all crossed into Kansas City, and it was either for the mothers to get there and get home and didn't have to rely on a family member. My mom never told her parents even. And it was only in the last 4 days of her life that she told my sister, Susan, and I about this baby. So when she told us, I gotta say, we were absolutely stunned. My mom was very quiet, very reserved, and very much a private person, even as she grew older. And it was just really kind of hard for us to believe. But Susan, a social worker, fortunately had the presence of mind to say, "Mom, would you like us to find him?" She wasn't absolutely sure it was a boy even, but she thought it was a boy, maybe born in the fall in Kansas City. Didn't say if it was Missouri or Kansas, but she was very ill at the time, and we just didn't want to pelt her with a lot of questions, so we didn't. And when we asked if she wanted us to try and look for him, she paused for a minute, and then she quietly said yes. And so we promised her we'd do our best to find him. We searched for 15 years. We did everything we knew how to do, and we filled out Susan and I, my sister, filled out 3 DNA tests and with 3 different services, and we scoured records. Unfortunately, records of adopted babies are sealed in Missouri, Kansas City, Missouri, it turned out. He was born there. And we did find dozens of relatives, but like third and fourth cousins. And that was a lot of fun. And I wrote to all of them that were above a 5 or 6% DNA match, and enjoyed some conversations, online conversations, but didn't even come close to finding somebody with the DNA needed to match a sibling, a half sibling. We would have the same mother, different fathers. So I started to give up and kind of forgot, but still there was something at the back of my mind just kind of working on me. Maybe he's still out there somewhere. But life goes on. We had 3 kids who got married, had 10 grandkids, and so life gets in the way sometimes of your quest. So after Betty was published is when we published, I have to actually read the title so I get it right, it's so long. And there's a reason for that I won't go into it. Times they are a-changing, as told by a couple married happily most days for 50 plus years. And it's really a series of essays about meeting at college, marrying young, having 3 kids, being broke, enjoying our careers. We both had careers that we liked. Watching their 3 kids grow up and then having children of their own, staying married, staying sane, and just trying to keep up. After Times was published, I said, okay, that's it, I'm done. I'm done writing books. I said that after Betty too, after Betty's memoir. But this is Times, and we have kind of a collage of pictures of us from the early days. And one thing you'll notice is that every title is a song that we liked, mostly from the 50s, 60s, 70s. Once in a while, beyond that, if it fit the chapter we were writing. Okay, so after 15 years, we pretty much concluded that the baby had either died at birth. My mom, who was a nurse, said that she thought there was something wrong with the baby. She only got to see him briefly, and then they took him out. Or died since, because he would be in his late 60s, maybe early 70s when we started looking for him. Or he didn't want to be found by his biological family, which completely understandable, and we would certainly respect that. Or one other possibility, mom's secret, the baby, maybe was a hallucination, a product of the morphine and heavy painkillers she was taking. At one point, when she was very ill, she was seeing Mexican children, and you know, this is not when immigration was a big thing. This was 15 years ago, and she told Susan and I, "You have to help them." And so, and she realized that they were hallucinations too. So we thought that was definitely a possibility. So since we felt pretty good about our effort, we didn't feel guilty about stopping to look. And then an 11-word text that came on an August Sunday afternoon changed everything. Now I'm going to skip ahead 150 pages or so to how it ended up that I co-wrote, co-authored Somewhere Out There with my half-brother, my newly discovered half-brother. I'm not going to tell you the whole story about how we first connected, but after we connected, we exchanged our first emails, and at the end of that very first email I sent him, I had kind of a PS. I said, by the way, if you want to know more about your birth mother, I wrote a book about her, and it'll tell you pretty much everything you might want to know about her. And if you'd like to read it, I'll send you a copy. And before I could do that, he had bought one from Amazon and had read it. He read it within the next 2 days. So he said it was really, really helpful, and he'd have to stop sometimes and say, I have to pinch myself and remind myself that these people I'm reading about are my flesh and blood. And we said that all the way through this experience, that it was really a surreal experience. It's something that takes a long time for the brain to process, that this person is my brother, and yet we weren't raised together. About 2 months into our writing back and forth, I'm sure we exchanged maybe close to 1,000 emails, and part of that was because of, well, most of it was because of the book. But I said, now there's some questions my mom would want me to ask you. And so one of them is, did you have a happy life? And he assured me that he had great adoptive parents. They also adopted a younger sister for him, and they were very close, and I met her several months later. And he grew up in Milwaukee, which stunned me because that was just straight across the street from where I grew up, the state where I grew up, which is Wisconsin, of course. And expectant mothers came from all over the country to Kansas City to have their babies. Why would they put the baby in the same state as the birth mother? I mean, we could have dated. I expect you read, you see these movies that probably aren't true about that, but I was just actually shocked, and I wondered if the doctor that helped Mom in La Crosse knew of a family in Milwaukee that was looking. But Alan, his name is Alan, he didn't think so. Because, well, first of all, his mom had always told him from the time he was a toddler that he was chosen. She didn't really use the word adopted, that he was chosen. Mm-hmm. And so she'd done her research on what to do with an adopted child. And actually, he literally was. According to him, his parents walked into this room full of bassinets and babies, and they got to pick which one they were going to take home. Mm-hmm. And this was back in 1947, so it's been a while. So his mom had asked him, when I refer to his mom, it's his adoptive mom. I'll call my mother, our mother, his birth mom. When he was, well, his mom had offered to help him find his birth family, and even showed him a birth certificate. He remembered the name Rawson, my mom's maiden name, and then also that his given name by my mom was Russell Rawson. Mm-hmm. And that kind of stumped me because I didn't know of any Russell. She had two favorite cousins. Russell was not their name, and her brother was Raymond. Well, we had a couple genealogy friends who do it just as a hobby, who one of them, I'm a shirt-tail relation of hers, so she had built my family tree onto her family tree, because she didn't have any kids, she does that full-time almost, building family trees. And she did some research, and she found out that Mom's brother Raymond, his middle name was Russell. So she had named him after her brother, and she didn't ever tell us that she had named this baby. But Alan was not interested in finding his family. He was in high school, he was in college, then he was in the Army. So he said he really wasn't interested. And I think after his mom died, she was in her 90s, I believe, that then he felt okay looking for his family. But when he first started looking, like 20 years ago, the DNA home tests weren't readily available like they are now. And so he had done a little checking on family trees and hadn't found anything. And of course, that was before Susan and I had started looking for him. And so he just didn't really think about it. And then one day, Alan and his wife Pam are really into fostering pets and helping out at PAWS, which is the equivalent of their People for Pets. And he was looking for a DNA test for his mixed breed dog. So he could find out more, what kind of dog was this? He knew it was 2 or 3 different breeds probably. And while he was doing it, he ordered one, but then he kept looking. He found this ad, a special price on human DNA. Now I knew they had human DNA tests. I didn't know they had them for dogs at that time.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he thought, well, what the heck, you know, it's a good price. I'll just order one of those and send in the swab from inside your cheek. And so really, if it hadn't been for his mutt and an impulse buy, we never would have found each other. And there are many things like that along the way that we should have been able to find each other, but somehow we did. Okay, so the book alone probably saved, Betty, a memoir, probably saved us hundreds of messages. And then he found out, he right away bought this book that Steve and I wrote, which is mostly about us. So he found out everything he wanted to know about us and more. So I also learned just in these messages, remember we'd never met in person at this point. For a year we had just written back and forth. We did FaceTime once when my sister was with me. So the 3 of us FaceTimed. But I also learned that he started college, did more partying than studying, his words, not mine, and flunked out. Well, it was the middle of the Vietnam War, so of course he was drafted. He wasn't married, didn't have a child, wasn't ready to go to those extremes to get out of being drafted, wasn't willing to go to Canada to avoid being drafted. So he was absolutely certain he would be heading for Vietnam, but he instead was assigned to Germany and really enjoyed his time there. Then he had 6 months left to serve of his term, so he was considered a short timer. And so when he went up to the window, the guy asked him a bunch of questions and then said, "Have you ever played baseball?" And he thought, what? American boy doesn't play baseball, just out in the backyard and nothing else. And he said, sure. And he's a big guy, 6'5", well over 200 pounds probably. And so he became the pitcher for the Army baseball team. And mostly though, he said they valued him for hitting home runs because he was such a big guy. So he had kind of an interesting college or Army experience. Then he got home and he went back to college, and this time he did well. And he got a degree in landscape architecture. He thought there was nothing better than sitting around drawing little trees, because that's what the landscape architect he worked with as an intern did. However, he branched out from from landscape design and ended up in irrigation. And he started his own company in Hawaii. He had moved to Hawaii just because they were looking for a nice place to live, he and his wife Pam, and so they moved to Hawaii, and he started this business and mostly did resorts and golf courses. And then he decided, you know, there's a lot of potential out there. So he did one in Guam on a military base. And after that, then he decided he would expand even further. And so he went to Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia, China, and the Philippines. And I know there's more, but that's what I remember right off the bat. And so he and his wife ended up traveling the world. I mean, they actually, once he was going to fly to Hong Kong, and he found out that if he'd make a stop in Antarctica, he could get an around the world pass. So he took his wife with him and they went around the world. I guess if you own the company, you could take as much vacation time as you want. It sounds like he had to work really hard. Starting the business wasn't easy. So just 2 months after Alan and I had become pen pals, I could tell that he was an articulate storyteller, and he had some really interesting experiences and very well traveled, very bright. And I got this idea, and in the back of my head, there was this little voice saying, no, don't ask him. It's way too soon. I, of course, ignored the voice and emailed him and said, how would you like to write a book with me? I always said that if we ever found my brother, that I would write another book, but I'd like it to be our story, not just my story. And he said, boy, he'd have to think about that, because the only writing he'd ever done was marketing reports for his business. And I said, take all the time you need, we're in no rush. And so I thought several days, maybe a week or two. 2 hours later, and sure enough, he wanted to give it a try. Said I'd have to coach him. He didn't know that I was relatively inexperienced too. But so we sent chapters back and forth, edited each other's work, and he had never told his stories before, all of them. I'll get to that later. I'm trying to avoid spoilers here. Once again, the unexpected changed everything. The brother we thought was gone from us or never existed in the first place became my co-author of Somewhere Out There. And I shouldn't tell you this, I hope you'll notice it on your own, but on the front is a single booty, and on the back there's two, because we found each other. It doesn't take much to entertain me. So there is one more surprise, and this one not a happy one. In late December, just of last year, a few months ago, just as Alan and I had finished writing the book and we're doing the final edit after maybe a dozen edits, he was diagnosed with a tumor, a glioblastoma, which is a very aggressive tumor. And in Alan's case, surgery wasn't an option. And so he was going to start radiation, and the prognosis for glioblastoma, if you're being really optimistic, is 8 to 12 months. And so he thought he had a few months left. And there are some insurance problems, and radiation started later than it should have, and then he got sick and couldn't even go into radiation. But we still thought he had a few months. But I rushed to get the book done, the first version. What I have tonight is the final version, to get it done so that he could actually see the book, have it in his hands. And it arrived about 10 days before he died on February 13th. So he only lasted about 7 weeks after his diagnosis. They knew something was wrong earlier than that, but they hadn't told him for sure what it was and what his prognosis was. So that was also kind of surreal. You know, he was here and then he was gone. We knew each other only for 19 months. I am grateful for the time we had, the 19 months that we had. In fact, the last chapter I had talked about, before I knew he was sick, I had talked about, you know, the right time. And people said, oh, too bad you didn't meet earlier. And I said, no, I felt like this was going to happen at the right time. This was the right time. And now I'm thinking, I wish I met him earlier. Because he did make it to, we did get to see him about 6 months before his diagnosis. He flew into Des Moines, and he got to meet my sister, who lives in Ankeny. And we had a big dinner with all of our kids, so he met his nieces and nephews he didn't know he had. And then we brought him back to Spencer, and he spent a couple days at our house and looking through old photos, and Steve went through very patiently and identified everybody, and we made copies of pictures. So that was nice, but even at that time, we thought maybe he was having some health issues. So, but we didn't think it was a brain tumor. We thought maybe a little stroke or something, because he wasn't the same, didn't seem like the same guy I was writing to. He used to take his dogs for 2-mile walks, and we noticed that he had some balance issues when he was there. But like I said, I'm grateful for the time that we did have. So we happened to be in Orange Beach, Alabama when he died, and coincidentally having lunch with his daughter, who was on his way down to see him, whom we'd never met. And as soon as we got home, my phone rang, and here it was his daughter telling me that he had died. So he died while we were meeting with his daughter. I think he would have been pleased with that we had met her and gotten along so well. She's also a very interesting person. So after the memorial service, both his wife, his daughter, and his adoptive sister told me they were so happy I'd gotten him to write this book, because they really didn't know half of the stuff that's in the book. And besides the book, he wrote a very detailed biography of his life, and then scaled it down, because this is a memoir, not a biography, as my editor friends pointed out. And so he gave that to his family. So they had even more details than in the book. And they were just really grateful for that. So, have any of you don't have to raise your hands. You can if you want to. Have any of you thought about writing your memoir? Writing a memoir? Yeah, I know a couple of you have. Have you started on it? If not, why not? I frequently say anyone with a story idea and a laptop can publish a book. And if you want to know how that's done without it costing you anything, I'd be happy to talk to you about that. Independently published books, which mine are. And really, you don't even need a computer. If you're not a friend of technology, if you got a good pen and a lot of paper, you can write a book. And where do you start, people ask. Well, you write the first line and you go from there. And you don't worry about it. If it's written well, you just get it all down on paper. That's the biggest hurdle, for me at least. And then you go back, and I told Steve when we were talking about writing, I said, it's a little bit like a sculptor. You take this big hunk of clay, and you pinch at it, and you pull some clay off, and then you mold it with your fingers, and then you take some more off. Then you make little indents, and you just keep correcting it until it's as perfect as it's going to be, and you'll never be happy with it. At least I'm never happy with it. I haven't read any of my books since they got published. I just cringe at the thought of reading, because I'm afraid I'm going to read something that's awkwardly phrased sentences or whatever. But I mean, I've read little parts of it, but I've never read from cover to cover. So anyway, it doesn't matter what your first draft is. One of my favorite writers, Anne Lamott, she writes both fiction and nonfiction, and she writes a book about writing. And she has a chapter entitled, and I'm going to make this G-rated, Your Crappy First Draft. Everybody's first draft is terrible. So just plan on that, but eventually you get it going. Bill?
So would a good first attempt be to just write your obituary?
Yeah.
And see how that works, and then flesh it out, or go on a different angle to get a actual draft. But the obituary is going to tell the highlights.
Yeah, and actually a memoir is not your whole life. But if you want to do it for your family, it should be your whole life, I think. The high points of your life. A memoir is usually just a space in time. But it's interesting you say that because in one of my college writing classes, the first assignment was to write our obituary. Yeah. And it was actually one of my first jobs at the Daily Reporter. And I think that the funeral home, I've got 3 people I worked with at the Daily Reporter here. I think the funeral home would read it over the phone to us, and then we could maybe kind of clean it up. But, so, and speaking of writing, I just thought I'd end with a meme that caught my eye once that I just applies so much to me. And it's a conversation between a person and a writer. And I wish I had little puppets to do this. But okay, so the person says, how does writing work? And the writer says, well, you type and you delete, you rethink, then you do 187 minutes of research and correct what you've written, you reread and wonder if you have a grasp of the English language at all. And then the person says, then you're done with the book? And the writer says, then you move to the next sentence. And that's kind of how it is. I know that James Patterson writes a book in 3 weeks, puts it in a desk drawer, and doesn't look at it for 3 months. And then he looks at it and does any editing that it needs. But for me, it's a daily grind. And I enjoy it, don't get me wrong, I really do enjoy it. But sometimes you wonder if it's ever gonna get done. Anybody have any questions about the book or the writing process?
What were the 11 words? Were you going to release those?
I skipped that, didn't I? Oh, I kind of intended to, but since you asked, I'd be happy to tell you. It was not from Alan, as a matter of fact. Alan, when he got the DNA report, it said, I was a 23% match and my sister was a 24% match. And so he was pretty sure we were his sisters. But he wrote us a message through 23andMe, kind of like a Facebook private message or Instagram message, DM. And Susan doesn't read hers. And I was checking all 3 of mine, but one day I couldn't get in, and you pay a fee. And I thought, well, I stopped paying the fee because I thought I was done with it. And so I thought they deleted all my information. I spent like an hour on the phone trying to get it back with the service person, but I couldn't. Well, it turns out he had written to us and I had not seen it. So he had to wonder if we were just ignoring him. We didn't want to find him. You know, I feel kind of bad about that. But he noticed that my genealogy friend, high school classmate Leanne, who was a Churchill relative, had my family tree there, and he saw my name on her family tree. So he contacted her through 23andMe. And she wrote back and she said, would you give me a call? She was very skeptical. As was our other friend who was doing some genealogy work for us and some investigation. And he called back and she was convinced within a few minutes that he was my brother. And so he told her, that your sister has been looking for you for 15 years. So that had to be a big relief to him, because for all he knew, my mom had never told us about him. So that was really the ideal way. So I say that I found my brother, but technically he found us. Any other questions?
In the time that you spent with Alan, like here in Spencer or any time that you were together, did you ever get a sense of characteristics that matched? Temperament, disposition? Could you feel any kind of a connection through characteristics like temperament or disposition or anything?
when he came down the escalator at the airport, if you've been in the Des Moines airport, Steve turned to me and said, "He looks like your Grandma Rawson, who's been gone for 30 years, probably." I didn't see a resemblance. He grew up, when he was growing up, he had red hair. But like I said, he's 6'5". He's also bald. So I didn't know he had red hair. But then later, I saw pictures of him when he was in his 40s with a mustache and kind of longish hair like you'd have in the 60s. And he looks a lot like my brother, my full brother. And so that was really the first I saw a likeness. But the red hair, you know, we all, my sister and I both have red hair. My mom had red hair. But did you see any other similarities or characteristics?
Just physical characteristics. I think when he came up to Spencer with us, we both kind of suspected that something might be wrong. Because he wasn't terribly outgoing. I didn't think he was quiet, very friendly, you know. So we didn't, I don't think we really saw behaviorally his true picture.
I don't think so either. And you know, it had to be a nerve-wracking experience.
Sure.
He gets on a plane by himself. His wife had been having a lot of health problems and had been in a car accident, so she didn't come. But like we say in the book, what if he doesn't like us? What if I don't like him? You know, you don't, this guy could be writing from a prison somewhere. How would I know, you know, otherwise? So you think about all those things, but you know, deep down I knew he was my half-brother because of the DNA test, even before I met him. I know that there have been some mistakes with DNA, but for the most part, it's pretty accurate. And to be 24 or 25% match. So, I did bring, any other questions? I don't want to keep you here all night.
What's the next book?
I actually, when I started to write this book, it was going to be a book kind of about breast cancer. And then I found Alan, or about cancer. And I had interviewed a couple friends with breast cancer who had much more, a much later stage and just much more serious treatment than I did. And I tried to put it all in a book, and once again, my friends, in the nicest way possible, said, "This book needs a total overhaul." No, they did not use those words at all. They were very polite, but they were absolutely right. You'll read in appreciation that they were absolutely right. And so we pondered it for a couple of months, and we thought, okay, here's what we do. Instead of Alan and I alternating chapters, because I'm talking about my life after Betty, he's talking about his life before he heard of Betty, he knew about Betty, and it just didn't make sense. So then I thought, what if we do part 1 is my story, part 2 is Alan's story, and part 3 is our story. And I hope that works better, but I'm so nervous about that too. So I did bring some books. If you're interested, if you want, you can check them out you could check, I gave some books to the library, so they have all 3 books here. They are, Amazon price is $13, $12.99. We'll give you a penny back if you want one. But please don't feel obligated. And I told Steve to remind me of this because I forgot it. I did a program for Rotary earlier today, and I forgot to say, all profit from sales of the books goes for nursing scholarships in memory of my mother. And we've given away 18. I was just in Wisconsin a few days ago to give one to a soon-to-be nurse, well, soon-to-be 4 years probably. And that's been very satisfying to be able to do that. And we actually discussed that with my mom in the hospital, and she loved the idea. So it goes to my high school, Spencer High School, and Iowa Lakes Community College, where I worked. My mom was a proctor, very part-time position, and now our son teaches nurses at Iowa Lakes in Emmitsburg, teaches anatomy and physiology. So it just made sense to go with those 3 schools. If this book sells and we have more money than we need for scholarships, we will either add more scholarships or increase the amount. So, thank you very much. I'm just really pleased to see so many of you here. I knew that 2 of you were coming, and that's all I knew for sure. So I'm really glad to see you. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you SMU for being here. We'll be recording it and you can watch it again if you want or tell your friends about it. That would be great.